guys, Katie here. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a let's talk about it video, and we're going to be talking about more Disney fan theories. This is part 6, and this is going to be about like the older princesses, so Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Little Mermaid, so Ariel. The reason Belle is not in this is because one of the other parts of this that I did, there was a lot of Beauty and the Beast ones. So, that's why Belle is not in this one. We're going to start off with a Snow White theory. So it says, Snow White, the mirror was not magic. This is not specific to the Disney implementation. This theory applies to even the earliest versions of this fairy tale. When you ask a mirror anything, the image the mirror will always show you is yourself. Asking a mirror who is the fairest of them all is a rhetorical question, and that was the intent of the evil queen's query. She was likely a very stunning person, but as she grew old, she became insecure with her appearance. This was evident in the fact that she had to continuously seek validation from an inanimate object that was only capable of giving her the answer she was looking for. When she finally realized that someone had surpassed her, jealousy consumed her. The image of Snow White haunted her. She started seeing visions of her in her own mirror, a sacred place reserved for the queen to admire herself. She snapped. Obviously, this implies that the dialogue with the mirror was taken from the queen's perspective, an imagined or embellished narrative. I don't know. I just think the mirror was magic, to be quite honest. The next Snow White theory is the origin of the 7 dwarfs. Here it is. There's a scene in the beginning of the movie where the dwarves are packing up to leave the mine, and they put all their jewels in one room. Nothing weird so far, right? But then we see one of them lock the door and turn to leave. He then stops, turns back around, and hangs the key next to the door. He has basically left their day's work unguarded. But why? And now that I think about it, there are some more unanswered questions that the dwarves leave in the movie. 1. Why don't the dwarves spend any of the money they make? Every time we see the dwarves, they do not seem to live like they are rich. They live in a one-room house, and almost all their stuff is homemade. 2. Why does it seem like they have been cared for before? In the movie, there are scenes where the dwarves are way too accustomed to being cared for by Snow White. The wash scene is the best example. They understand they have to obey her command and wash up before dinner, and even have a song about it. If they had never been cared for, they would have ignored her and just started eating. 3. Why do the dwarves have a time that they get off of work? I mean, their lives are focused around digging, and from what we know about dwarves, they do not require a lot of sleep. So why have a time to stop working instead of having just a break time? 4. We know that dwarves live to be around 250 years old, and judging by how old they look in the movie, they're about 150, so where did all that time go? I think that all these questions can be answered with my theory. It all starts around the year 1450, where the dwarves are under the rule of a kind and loving master and his wife. They care for the dwarves, and in return the dwarves mine diamonds for them. The dwarves do not need the money, so the key I mentioned is always in the master's pocket, so he can pick up the diamonds at his leisure. Around the year 1475, the master dies, so the dwarves have a funeral for him, which explains how they know how to have a funeral when Snow White dies. After this, his widow starts to treat the dwarves more like children, and even writes a song for them to use when they need to wash up. At around 1500, the master's wife dies, and they hold another funeral. The dwarves are then banished by the evil queen and forced to live in the woods. They continue to work in the mines out of hope that a new master will come along to care for them, aka Snow White, digging jewels for a new master. They build a house and hang the key next to the door in hopes that one day the new master will come. 50 years pass, making the dwarves 150 years old. They then meet Snow White, and the rest, as they say, is history. That is, like, such a good theory, to be quite honest. I really like that theory. Because, yeah, there are a lot of, like, unanswered questions about these dwarves. Like, who are they mining the jewels for? Why do they, like, never get into contact with anybody else? Like, how are they, or why are they all living in a one-room house, basically, with 7 of them? And, like, I don't know. That is such a good theory. I've never even thought about that before. This is the last Snow White theory. Snow White and the 7 Dwarves. The dwarves are also cursed. In the Disney classic Snow White and the 7 Dwarves, the evil queen curses Snow White with the poison apple. We all know this, but why didn't she also retaliate against the dwarves for housing and hiding her? I believe that she didn't do anything because they are actually already cursed to mine jewels and gems for her from their mine. In their opening song, they admit, "We dig up diamonds by the score, 1,000 rubies, sometimes more, but we don't know what we dig them for." They don't know exactly why they are digging up these gems and jewels, except for a vague understanding about getting rich. They also don't seem to have a storehouse for whatever they dig up, and what they do have isn't well guarded. I theorize that the evil queen cursed them years ago to dig gems up, and every so often she goes and takes whatever they mine out of the mine. They just have no idea that she's taking them, or that they are even cursed. This is why she doesn't retaliate against them, because she still wants them working for her, and why they help attack her in the end, since they don't know who she is. That's a good theory, too. That's like a really good theory, too. Now I'm conflicted. Now we need a movie about the dwarves. Just the dwarves. Their backstory. Why they are the way they are. Who named them? I know that they get their names when they touch the pickaxe or whatever, I think, right? That's Snow White, isn't it? But, like, why do they get these names? Why are they gem miners? What is going on? I need a movie all about the dwarves. Disney, get to it, please. This next theory is the one and only Cinderella theory. I believe I've done a couple other Cinderella theories in parts 1 through 4. Somewhere in there were more Cinderella theories. So of course I didn't want to repeat theories, therefore why there's only one in this video. Disney's Cinderella, why the glass slipper only fits her. The royal ball was the biggest event happening in the kingdom. Literally everyone wanted to be there, if not to be chosen as the prince's bride, then to see who in the kingdom would become the new ruling citizen. No one was going to miss it. Since it was royalty, everyone put on their nicest and typically most uncomfortable outfits, including shoes that weren't made for comfort. Then they arrived early and stood there for hours, watched the prince dance with a mysterious woman, saw her flee, stayed to gossip about the whole ordeal, and slowly filtered out of the kingdom back to their homes. By contrast, Cinderella's clothes were transformed into a perfectly fitting outfit. This included the famous glass slippers, which, while unfortunately made of the worst shoe material on the planet, were magically designed to fit her feet perfectly. She then went to the party by carriage and only stayed long enough to dance with the prince before fleeing. The next day, when the kingdom is searching for the mysterious woman, everyone in the kingdom has swollen and sore feet from standing in uncomfortable shoes for hours in the castle. This includes anyone who happens to wear the same size shoes as Cinderella. Also, since her feet are naturally small, no one's feet would swell to the same size. Finally, since she spends all day every day on her feet doing work, Cinderella's feet aren't swollen in the least. This allows the slipper to fit perfectly. I don't know if I agree with that. I just think this magical slipper somehow only fit Cinderella, but didn't fit her well enough to stay on when she lost one. But maybe that was the plan, all along, for one of the slippers to fall off so the prince could find her. I don't know. But it can't be such a simple explanation as that everybody else's feet were swollen, right? I don't know. I don't know about that one. Okay, now we are getting into the Sleeping Beauty theories. So the first one. The fairies couldn't kill Maleficent until she was in dragon form. Just rewatched it with my kid and I noticed something. Fauna wants to turn Maleficent into a toad. Flora corrects her, saying their magic doesn't work that way and can only do good. Not that they're not powerful enough to take her on, but the objection is they can only do good. This gets seemingly contradicted at the end when Flora enchants the prince's sword to kill Maleficent. So they can't transfigure her, but they can enchant a sword to kill her. What gives? And the enchantment on the sword specifically says to kill, so there's no doubt that it was used to fight, and he just happened to kill her. Well, what changed? Notice up to this point, all the fairy magic was evasive. Cut the cuffs, turn boulders into bubbles, arrows into flowers, rainbow bridge, etc. They give a prince a sword and shield, but when Flora conjures them, she says it's for protection. She doesn't add the kill enchantment until later. It's not until Maleficent turns into a dragon that the fairies get lethal. When Maleficent turns into a dragon, she specifically says she summons all the powers of hell. So she's not just a dragon. She's imbued with the powers of hell and just happens to take a form that looks and acts like how we think a dragon is. This is what allows the fairies' good magic to be used for killing. They're not killing someone who is evil anymore. Now they're up against all the powers of hell, which good magic can absolutely destroy. Also, when the smoke clears, she disintegrated. So she was a true abomination at that point, adding further evidence of why she was fair game. It says, edit, one caveat is that Flora turns the raven to stone. I guess non-sentient animals aren't protected from good magic. Okay, I will admit, Sleeping Beauty is not one of my favorite movies. So, I'm trying to think back and not get it mixed up with actual Maleficent, because I love the actual Maleficent movies, but the Sleeping Beauty movie itself, the Sleeping Beauty movie itself, it didn't do anything for me. But I mean, that could make sense. And maybe not, it wasn't even until she was in dragon form, it was when she said that she was, conjuring all of the powers of hell or whatever. She was fully dark magic. It's possible. It's possible. I wonder if she still became the dragon but didn't say that she was embodying the power of hell, if they still would have been able to do that. Makes a lot of sense. Merryweather's gift to Aurora would have been wisdom or insight. This is about the old animated film and doesn't include updated versions. Flora's gift to infant Princess Aurora was beauty. Fauna's was song. We never got to see what gift Merryweather meant to bestow upon Aurora, because Maleficent showed up, cursed the baby princess to die at 16, and left Merryweather to change her gift in order to lighten the severity of Maleficent's curse, changing the result to sleep rather than death, and allowing that the curse can be broken by true love's kiss, showing that Merryweather's powers can affect the outcome of Aurora's future, despite working against Maleficent's curse powers. Philip and Aurora had a fairly flirty scene together for the time period. It's possible that if they had kissed at the end of the Once Upon a Dream segment, Aurora's curse would have been broken early before it ever really took effect. Aurora had dreams of meeting a handsome stranger, typically princessy dreams, but the outcome of her future romance is the key to her curse being broken as well. Her gifts of beauty and song help bring about her eventual true love. I think Merryweather's gift would have to do with brains or foresight, rather than beauty. Merryweather was the most realistic and least optimistic of the three, reminding Flora of how Maleficent might foil her original plan to turn her into a flower. She also realistically was doubtful about their ability to live as mortals. She convinced the others to use magic when their attempts to bake a cake and sew a dress the hard way failed. Merryweather did not underestimate Maleficent, stating she knows everything, and being corrected by Fauna, who often seemed less sharp than Flora or Merryweather, but understood that Maleficent doesn't know about love and kindness. Merryweather showed an independent and rebellious streak, speaking out against Aurora's betrothal before they realized Philip was the boy she had fallen in love with, and being scolded by Flora, "That's not for us to decide." Since Merryweather also turned Maleficent's pet crow into stone, even chasing it to do so, this shows that her powers can possibly be used for more gray area magic than the other two, since turning an animal to stone seems a little less pure white magic than the abilities shown by Flora and Fauna. She also grumped about wanting to turn Maleficent into a toad. The other two react in shock, saying their powers can only be used for good and happiness, to which she retorts, "Well, that would make me happy." If Merryweather had been allowed to bestow her original gift, she would want the princess to have the useful and somewhat gray area ability to rule with wisdom and insight so that she might succeed in more ways than being beautiful and charming as a future monarch, reflecting Merryweather's own somewhat less naive and realistic, pessimistic gray area personality. Her color, blue, being associated with cool, cold, rather than warmth, rain, water, and sadness or sorrow, along with her name suggesting seasonal changes, also may be supportive of what traits she would place importance upon. That's super interesting. Like I said, Sleeping Beauty has never been, like, my favorite. Like, obviously, I get, like, the gist of it. You know, Maleficent curses her, you know, the spinning wheel, the prick, you know, the finger prick, fall into a deep sleep, true love's kiss, yada yada yada. You know, of course, like, I get that, like, the general, like, gist of the story, but I never really thought about what Merryweather's gift to Aurora would have been. And I never really, and don't get me wrong, I haven't seen Sleeping Beauty in a hot minute. This makes me want to go watch it. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. To me, anyway. Okay, the next Sleeping Beauty theory is King Stefan is not Aurora's father. This theory is only for the movie and does not take into account the two Maleficent movies. So Sleeping Beauty starts by telling us that the king and queen had been trying to have a child for many years before Aurora was born. Both King Stefan and Queen Leah had brown eyes. The queen has blonde hair and the king has dark brown hair. Aurora has blonde hair like her mother and blue eyes, like neither of them. I believe that the king is infertile and the queen had an affair or just wanted to give the king a child with a blue-eyed man. This also explains why they would go along with the insane plan that the fairies came up with of raising Aurora in the woods away from them. The queen probably pushed for that plan so Stefan would see her as little as possible and therefore never question why his daughter, who took years to be conceived, has blue eyes. I mean, it's a thought. It's thought. But also, like, honestly, if Stefan or Leah's parents had brown eyes, blue eyes, genetically Aurora could have blue eyes. I mean, genetics plays a huge part in things. But I don't know at the time if Walt Disney knew about genetics. I don't really know when genetics were first, like, not discovered, but, you know, like, looked into, is the word I'm looking for. But I've always felt the vibe that King Stefan maybe wasn't Aurora's father. But I don't know. It's an interesting theory. Aurora's birthday cake in Sleeping Beauty wasn't a cake at all. It was a donut tower. Growing up, Sleeping Beauty was one of my favorite Disney movies. I was also absolutely fascinated by the birthday cake made for Aurora by Fauna the Fairy. It's still one of my favorite movie sequences of all time. Only now do I realize, through taking up baking as a hobby side hustle, that the cake wasn't a cake at all, but a tower of donuts. Rewatching the scene today, the first thing I noticed was that the recipe called for an obscene amount of flour for a cake, 3 cups. Okay, the cake was absolutely massive, so maybe that's not so weird. Second, when the recipe calls for Fauna to fold in the eggs, she does so by physically lifting the mixture and draping it over the eggs like a blanket. If you've never made a cake before, cake batter is usually fairly runny and pourable. You can't just pick it up. Instead, the batter is behaving like a bread dough. But maybe Fauna is just that bad at cooking? Well, probably, but I don't think so in this case, because the third thing the recipe calls for is yeast. Yeast is almost never used in cakes. Instead, cakes rise with leaveners, such as baking powder, soda, or even stiffly beaten eggs. This is the biggest clue that she's following a bread recipe and not a cake recipe. But because the recipe includes eggs, something most breads do not, that means it's an enriched dough which can take the form of breads like babka, challah, brioche, dinner buns, cinnamon rolls, and you guessed it, donuts. As for why it's donuts and not some other enriched bread, we can discount challah, brioche, and babka right away because the recipe doesn't use enough eggs. Cinnamon rolls are possible, but the resulting cake looked pretty pale and was thus likely lacking cinnamon. Dinner rolls are also a possibility, but tend to use no/minimal sugar, and probably even Fauna knew a cake should have sugar. Thus, we come to donuts, unknowingly baked rather than fried, in dish shapes rather than rings, and stacked up into the droopy broomstick accessorized blue ice cake tower that so dominated my childhood dreams. It's possible. But could it also be possible that that's how they made cakes back in Sleeping Beauty times? What if cakes were just fancy bread? What if donuts are the original cake? We may never know. So yeah, she could have made a donut cake, or that might just be the way the cakes were made. The last Sleeping Beauty theory. Aurora's mother got Maleficent's help to give birth. This was one I found on TV Tropes, but it hasn't been posted here, so bear with me anyway. When we first see Maleficent in the celebration of Aurora's birth in Sleeping Beauty, everyone, including the fairies and King Safam, stares on in stupefied horror. That is, everyone except Queen Leah, the queen and Aurora's mother, who has a more nervous expression, almost as if she was expecting the evil fairy to arrive. Then, when the good fairies calmly tell Maleficent she wasn't invited, she relaxed seemingly with surprise. That and Maleficent infamously cursing Aurora to die only happened after that exchange. Lastly, remember how in the beginning of the film it was said Aurora's parents had struggled to bear a child for years? Surely these facts are not coincidental. As such, it is possible, likely in fact, that Queen Leah turned to Maleficent's sorcery to be able to bear a child. Maleficent agreed, on condition that Leah promised to acknowledge her once Aurora was born. However, things went downhill, because Leah knew that Maleficent had a rather nasty reputation, and went back on the promise. So when Maleficent found this out, hence her surprise reaction, she quickly decided that if Leah wasn't keeping her promise, then the deal was off, and Aurora had to go. The whole 16 years thing was to further twist the knife as revenge for how Leah backed out at the last minute. Holy freaking moly. That is an amazing theory. Amazing. I've always wondered why Maleficent was so obsessed. Why does it matter if she wasn't invited to the party of the birth of Aurora? And that makes sense. So much sense. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, now we are moving on to The Little Mermaid. So the first one. Ursula from The Little Mermaid is King Triton's sister and Ariel's aunt. I've heard something like this before, but this is what this Reddit person said. Just a thought I had rewatching The Little Mermaid this morning. Ursula only wants the throne and mentioned she lived in a castle at one point. While not a lot of evidence, I believe that suggests Ursula might be King Triton's older sister. When the time of succession came, Ursula being older wanted the throne, but Titan, as the male heir, took it or was given it. When Ursula wouldn't accept the decision, maybe she even attempted a coup. She was kicked out of the castle and kingdom. King Triton marries, has kids, rules, thinks Ursula is gone forever, but Ursula is secretly lurking, taking out mermaids and mermen one by one to get revenge, while she waits for a chance at Triton. Eventually, as we see in The Little Mermaid, she gets that chance via Ariel, and the rest is history. Like I said, not a lot of evidence for it, but there's no evidence against it, and I think it adds another interesting layer to a great movie. Yeah. Like I said, I've heard that theory before. I think it's a very popular theory about The Little Mermaid. But yeah, I mean, I can see it being true. Maybe once she was banished, she was turned into that octopus thing. The next Little Mermaid theory. Flotsam, I'm going to say it wrong. Flotsam and Jetsam moved Eric's statue to Ariel's cavern. In the middle of the excellent Under the Sea, Flounder whispers something to Ariel and she leaves. They go to her cavern, and in the center is the statue Gormley commissioned. The question becomes, how did it get there? Flounder said he found it, but how did he move it if it wasn't there? Earlier we see his lack of physical prowess when he and Ariel encounter a shark, and he doesn't quite have the strength to help Ariel out. Now at this point, Ursula has designs on Ariel as a way to get back into power. When the statue falls into the sea, she sees an opportunity to sow discord in the Triton household. So she orders her minions, the excellently named Flotsam and Jetsam, to move the statue into Ariel's cavern. Because there's no true demonstration of their power aside from them tipping over a small boat, we cannot say they cannot move the statue. But we cannot rule it out. Also, Ursula doesn't seem the type to do heavy lifting. She may have imbued them magical strength, however. Makes a lot of sense. Honestly, we know Flounder couldn't do it. Obviously, the eels working together could do it. So, very possible. Next, Little Mermaid theory. Why Ariel didn't write Eric a note, and why it wouldn't matter if she did. A huge criticism of the Little Mermaid has been, well, if Ariel can read and write, since she was shown to read the contract and sign it, why not just write Eric a note explaining to him what happened and what he has to do? She gets her kiss and wins and stays human. But there's a very simple explanation for why this neither occurs, as well as why it wouldn't have worked. It's actually specifically said in the movie. Per Ursula, he's got to kiss you, not just any kiss, the kiss of true love. Writing Eric a note does nothing to further that goal. In fact, it could even endanger it, as her telling him she's a mythical creature princess who sang with a voice so beautiful he can't get it out of his head. Yet here she stands as a mute human he found washed up on the beach in rags, just makes her look crazy. Eric would be less inclined to kiss her, let alone love her, which is the real goal. She's after Eric's true love kiss, not just a regular kiss. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, but really she didn't, if she had written him a note, let's just say, she could have just said, I saved you, I lost my voice. I mean, She didn't have to explain, oh, I'm a mermaid and I traded my voice for legs. Just, you know, I'm the one who saved you, but I lost my voice when I got washed back out to sea. Who knows? She could have said that. She could have written it. Who knows? But I do agree that if she had written that, like, you know, I'm a mermaid and, you know, I traded my voice for a pair of legs because I'm obsessed with you, he wouldn't have been able to fall in love with her. He would have said she was crazy. Okay, this one is kind of the same as one of the other ones, but also completely different. This one is Ursula is King Triton's ex-wife. So now she's not his sister. She's his ex-wife. She says that they had fantastical feasts when she lived in the palace. In fact, she wasn't so morbidly obese and was a beautiful mer-person, only to reach her final form as a result of practicing and using black magic. She was secretly apprenticing under another sea witch while still with Triton. Sensing something was different about his wife, he eventually found out, forcing the divorce and her banishment. Free to train without restriction, she finally becomes a full-blown sea witch. She then kills her mentor to be the sea witch, rule of one. While Ursula is training, Triton's new wife gives birth to Ariel's 6 sisters. On the day Ariel is born, Ursula murders Ariel's mother and escapes into hiding, waiting for her chances to strike back. She sees that chance 16 years later. And then this person says, edit. Wow, I learned a lot about this movie today. My theory came from having to listen to it in the background for the last few weeks, and came up with the backstory for Ursula for fun. Maybe this is more of a post for another subreddit. I never researched anything about the movie. My theory was more or less to get an eye roll from my wife, and just thought I'd share. Okay, so I don't agree with the ex-wife thing. The part that I'm gonna say I agree with, or that is more like believable, is that she was secretly apprenticing under another sea witch while she lived in the castle as Triton's sister. That's the part I'm gonna agree with. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And Triton could have found out and told her father, and then she got banished, or, you know, whatever, maybe he found out and he banished her, whatever. I think that's more likely. I obviously don't think that she's his ex-wife. Next theory. Why Ariel's sisters all look different. Says, disclaimer, this theory only applies to the first movie and none of the sequels or TV specials or anything. Why do Ariel's sisters all have different colored hair? It has to do with the fact that they are mermaids and how mermaids reproduce. Merfolk have their human parts on top and their fishy parts on the bottom. This is obvious. It follows that their reproductive organs are among the fishy parts below their waist. If their reproductive organs are fishy parts, then they must produce like fish. Once a year, fish produce by spawning. The females lay a clutch of eggs, and the males discharge sperm onto those eggs. The eggs are fertilized, and little baby fish will soon hatch. Merfolk are biologically no different. The females spawn, and the males fertilize their eggs. But the above explanation doesn't account for the fact that merfolk are half human and highly social. Just like we full humans, they must have very highly developed rituals surrounding their spawning habits. Moreover, merfolk have a stratified society with a patriarch, King Triton, on top. As king, he probably has a harem of highly desirable females with whom he reproduces. These females probably go to a private royal spawning ground to lay their eggs, and the king then can fertilize these eggs without competition. This contrasts with other males who probably have varying levels of competition with each other to fertilize the eggs of desirable females. Thus, a single male fertilizes eggs of different females, and daughters with different features are born. Ariel's sisters all have different moms. This theory may hold may not hold a lot of water, but it was fun to think about. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But I mean, in a way, I don't know if you can just say, like, it's the animation style, but they all look the same. Just a different coloring, like different hair coloring, and eye coloring, and, you know, fin coloring, or tail, whatever you call it. But they were all white in the animation. I know that the live action is different, and the live action has a different reason for it. But yeah, it's it's interesting, but I don't know. It's possible. Eric was so obsessed with Ariel because she inadvertently enchanted him when she saved him. Kinda a simple one, really. Ariel is a mermaid, which are also known as sirens. Sirens use their voice to bewitch sailors. It's stated in the movie that Ariel has the most beautiful voice. So when Ariel rescues Eric, she sings to him from her heart a song about her desire to be with him. She accidentally used the magic in her voice to enchant Eric the same way she would have if she had wanted to lure him like the sirens in Greek myths. Something she never quite realized she did. Ursula obviously knew how to do it because she later used Ariel's voice to put Eric under a spell to get him to marry her. But really, this explains why Eric's so obsessed / fell in love with a voice to the point of, I will marry beautiful voice girl and no one else, despite never having seen the girl. He literally couldn't get it out of his head, and it probably would have sent him insane if that necklace hadn't been broke in the end. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I think of mermaids versus sirens, I think sirens are usually, like, more evil, and mermaids are more, like, not evil. But I'm sure that, like, mermaids and sirens have a lot of similar qualities. I mean, the voice might just be one thing. So, makes a lot of sense. We are down to the last theory of this insanely long video. Sebastian and other fishes in The Little Mermaid were slaves. Okay, I had a few things to say, but I reread Under the Sea and it seems just obvious. It just seems obvious. Talking about the fishes just seems to be a metaphor to talk about slavery. I wonder if he and other people got their boat sunk by Ursula and then saved by Triton or Ursula herself. It would bring an interesting touch to the ending with Ursula getting stabbed by a ship she sunk. Anyway, about Ariel. Oh, is this one about the live action one? Okay, I don't know if this is about the live action. It says, anyway, about Ariel being black, it's going to bring a second lecture to this as Sebastian relates both because she's different from the humans and because he was a black dude with legs and it didn't quite change his fate. There's also the prince being able to hear Sebastian say Ariel as if transformed creatures can still talk human without being able to understand fishes who aren't transformed, but humanized for the sake of the movie, as if they were at the crossroad of both worlds. There's also the culture and influence that the fishes bring that is Afro-American for no reason. Anyway, what do y'all think? P.S. I didn't see any other thing in the first movie. Okay. This theory confuses me. Like, I get what they're saying, kind of. I think they're saying that Sebastian and Flounder and all the other fish that could talk were once people, and those people were on ships, and Ursula sunk the ships, and Triton saved the people by turning them into sea animals. I think this is what they're talking about. So, I don't know. I don't know. Because I don't know what this series is really talking about. I kind of get it, but I kind of don't get it. So, anyway, this was part, 6 of Let's Talk About Disney Fan Theories. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.